The August sun didn't just shine, it punished. It hung over Camp Donner like a molten hammer, slamming heat onto the asphalt until it rippled in waves. Cars rolling through the front gate left behind ghostly mirages that danced across the road before dissolving into air thick enough to chew. Corporal Elena Hayes stood in the center of that shimmering furnace, boots planted, uniform immaculate despite the heat carving relentless lines of sweat down her spine. Every breath tasted like metal and dust. The brim of her cover cast a thin sliver of shade across her eyes, but not nearly enough to block the sting of the sun. She ignored it, she always did. Gate duty wasn't a job, it was a message. We don't want you in the real workspaces. We don't want you where you shine. Today's message was loud enough for the whole base to hear. Inside the guard shack just a few feet behind her, two male corporals lounged like they were at a backyard barbecue rather than a military post. One had a fan pointed directly at him. The other was digging the last crumbs from a crinkled bag of chips. Their boots were propped on the desk. Their rifles were slung lazily on hooks. Their laughter spilled out onto the road every time Elena waved another vehicle through. "Building character out there, Hayes," Corporal Jenkins called, leaning halfway out the window. "Character and maybe some melanin," Corporal Brett added, snickering. More laughter. They weren't bad Marines, not by the book. They were just petty, insecure, and painfully aware that Elena had outshot, outran, and outperformed them in almost every metric the battalion tracked. And some people didn't like being outdone by someone they expected to fail. Elena, however, pretended they weren't even there. She scanned the next ID with calm, efficient motions. "Welcome aboard, sir. Proceed straight to the motor pool." A nod from the driver, a wave from her. The gate swung open with its usual groan, a sound Elena suspected would someday haunt her in her sleep. The road kept spitting out more traffic. Contractors, officers, Marines returning from chow, dusty Humvees coughing up diesel exhaust that burned her nose. She worked through them with the same unbroken rhythm. Check the ID, confirm, return it, wave through. Like a machine. But beneath the discipline, Elena felt a low itch, the kind that crawled across the back of your neck when something was off. She didn't immediately know why. Just a quiet, prickling alertness that military instinct recognized long before conscious logic did. Something wasn't normal. She stole a quick glance across the parking lot, eyes narrowing under the midday glare. And that's when she saw it. A black SUV parked alone, shadowed under a scrawny tree that offered as much shade as a toothpick. The windows were tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. The vehicle hadn't moved in, 10 minutes? 15. Every few seconds she caught the faintest flicker of movement. Someone inside shifting, repositioning, watching. Not the casual kind of watching, either. Not some base visitor waiting for a late Marine to walk out of the admin building. This felt directed, intentional. Focused on her. She inhaled slowly. Could be nothing, could be something. Elena knew better than to jump to conclusions. She had been trained to notice details, patterns, behavior, to see what didn't fit. A lone SUV, windows tinted, engine idling, occupant motionless. It didn't fit. But her job wasn't to investigate. Her job was to stand, smile, and wave in cars until her skin peeled. Inside the shack, the corporals had noticed nothing. Or maybe they had and didn't care. Jenkins slurped his soda and yelled out, "Hey Hayes, after this shift, you want to come clean my boots? You seem to love being on your knees out there." Brett burst into exaggerated laughter, the kind that came too easily from men who'd never seen anything resembling real hardship. Elena didn't even flinch. "Focus on your post, Corporal," she said calmly without turning. A chorus of mocking oohs erupted behind her. Her fingers tightened on the next ID card just slightly before she exhaled and let the frustration go. There was no point. Every time she outperformed them, every time she corrected them, every time she proved she belonged, they pushed back twice as hard. Let them talk, she'd been through worse. She handed the ID back to the driver. Proceed, sir, welcome aboard. The line of cars thinned. The road quieted. The heat didn't. And the black SUV still hadn't moved. She lifted her hand slightly to shield her eyes, angling her view for a better look. The windshield was a mirror, reflecting the sky instead of giving her any hint at who was inside. Why watch her, why now? She wasn't special. She wasn't on any assignment that mattered. She was literally the lowest profile Marine on the base today. Unless the person inside the SUV knew who she was. Not the corporal on gate duty. Not the woman the other Marines tried to push around. But the Alina Hayes, who had been in Helmand Province 2 years ago. Her jaw tightened. She didn't think about Helmand. Not during daylight. Not when the sun hit her skin with the same sensation as the fireball that had torn open the desert floor in front of her squad. But memory didn't care about timing. She blinked the thought away. Another car approached the gate. She stepped forward to meet it, posture crisp and flawless. Good afternoon, sir. ID, please. The driver leaned out and handed it to her. But his eyes flicked past her shoulder. Ma'am, he murmured. She glanced back. The SUV door had opened. A single boot hit the pavement, heavy, polished, deliberate. A man stepped out. Tall, broad, moving with the kind of confidence that didn't come from ego, but from surviving things most people never heard about. He closed the door and stood still for a moment, scanning the gate with an expression so sharp it felt like a blade slicing the air. Then his eyes locked on her, and he started walking forward. Inside the shack, Jenkins sat up suddenly. Brett, that guy, Navy, right? Looks like it, Brett replied. His voice sounded different, less smug, more uneasy. Alina didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. The man's insignia glinted when he stepped into the sun. Her heart stopped. It was a SEAL trident. But that wasn't the part that made her pulse spike. She knew that face. She knew that walk. She knew that rank. A Navy SEAL commander was walking straight toward her. And nothing, absolutely nothing about this made sense. The driver in front of her whispered, Corporal, I think someone important's here for you. Alina didn't answer. Because the commander kept coming. Each step closing the distance. Each footfall building a quiet, unmistakable tension in the air. Until he was only a dozen yards away. Close enough for her to see the storm behind his eyes. Close enough for her to feel her past clawing its way into the present. Close enough for one impossible thought to take shape. He's here for me. Alina's pulse thumped like a war drum. She kept her hands firm on the ID scanner, acting as if nothing had changed, but every nerve in her body screamed that something had. The black SUV, now revealed fully in the sun's harsh light, seemed almost to glow with quiet menace. Its tinted windows shimmered with a faint metallic reflection, making it impossible to see who was inside except she already knew. The man who had stepped out was deliberate, controlled, every step measured. Sunlight glinted off the insignia on his chest, the SEAL trident. His uniform was perfectly pressed, the creases sharp, the boots polished. But what struck Alina most wasn't his appearance, it was his presence. Some people carried authority in the air around them. This man radiated it like a second skin. He didn't rush. He didn't glance at the corporals lounging in the shack, nor at the idling vehicles. He walked toward her, each step crunching on the gravel like a muted echo of some distant battlefield. Inside the shack, Corporals Jenkins and Brett finally noticed him. Who's that?" Jenkins whispered, voice cracking slightly. Brett squinted, "Looks Navy." Alina didn't answer. She kept scanning IDs, pretending the seal's approach wasn't rewriting the entire landscape of her day. But she couldn't ignore the tension building in the air, the sense that the heat, the asphalt, the vehicles, the two idiots behind her, and this man were all connected in some way she didn't yet understand. Then the SUV door opened. It was slow, intentional, like every action this man performed carried weight. He didn't hurry, he didn't hesitate. He simply opened the door and stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath him in perfect cadence. Elena froze. The two corporals scrambled upright, suddenly aware that their jokes, their mockery, their small power dynamics were meaningless in the face of someone who clearly outranked them in more ways than they could comprehend. "Who is that?" Brett whispered, as though asking aloud might summon an answer. Elena didn't respond. She only straightened instinctively, her body aligning to attention despite the exhaustion of standing in the sun for hours. The man stopped about 20 feet away, eyes locked on her. No expression betrayed his thoughts, just a calm, unyielding stare that made her feel simultaneously exposed and recognized. Recognition, that word repeated in her mind. She knew him. But from where? Her pulse jumped as her memory flickered to distant echoes, explosions in Helmand, dust storms in the desert, the acrid scent of spent gunpowder and the raw, chaotic noise of firefights. She shook it away. That was the past. This was now. "Corporal Elena Hayes." The voice was low, commanding but not harsh. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice steady, though her stomach felt as though it had turned over. The commander nodded once, a subtle acknowledgement, but his eyes never left hers. There was no warmth, no judgment, just the undeniable recognition of someone who had seen her at her best and her worst, and who knew exactly what she was capable of. Behind her, Jenkins and Brett froze, gaping like schoolboys caught in the principal's office. "I've been looking for you," the commander said, voice steady, almost conversational, though every syllable carried weight. Elena's throat tightened. "Looking for me, sir?" Her mind raced. She had been on this base for months, doing menial gate duty, answering IDs, ignoring petty jokes. Why would a Navy SEAL commander seek her out here in this heat on this post? The man's gaze didn't waver. His presence seemed to press the heat down on her shoulders, a physical weight she hadn't anticipated. Inside the shack, the corporals whispered. "Did she fight somewhere?" "Wait, that's Hayes. She didn't do anything special." The commander turned his head slightly toward them. His look alone silenced the two corporals. Fear, respect, and disbelief mingled on their faces as if they had just glimpsed a ghost. Then his attention returned to Elena. "I read the after-action report from Helmand Province," he said slowly, deliberately. 2 years ago." Her breath caught in her throat. That chapter of her life was sealed away, a memory she rarely let surface, even among friends. It was raw, jagged, and deeply personal. "Yes, sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He took a step closer. "You dragged a wounded ranger through open fire and kept him alive for 19 minutes until medevac arrived. I've studied the incident, and let me tell you, that kind of action doesn't go unnoticed." The two corporals behind her exchanged stunned glances, their mouths opening and closing like fish. They had no idea. They had assumed gate duty was her permanent punishment, a sign of her incompetence. They were wrong. Elena swallowed, her hands gripping the ID scanner a little tighter. I just did my job, sir." "Some jobs," the commander said quietly, his tone carrying a weight that settled deep into her chest, "rewrite futures. Some earn respect. Some deserve more than a hot asphalt post at the edge of a base." The words hit her harder than the sun, more intense than the heat burning her skin. It wasn't just a recognition, it was validation. Something she had craved silently, something she had doubted she would ever receive from anyone in uniform. He stepped even closer, just enough that she could see the faint lines of fatigue etched into his face, lines carved not by age but by experience. His eyes softened just slightly. "And some," he added, "aren't repaid by standing on a gate in 100-degree heat." The corporals muttered among themselves again. Their laughter and smugness completely evaporated. Alina felt something stir deep inside her, a mix of disbelief, relief, and something that teetered on anticipation. What did he mean by that? Then, with deliberate calm, the commander reached into his pocket. He produced a small, plain envelope, thick, official, sealed. He held it out toward her. "This is for you," he said. "Open it after you leave this post." Alina's hands trembled ever so slightly as she took it. Her mind was spinning. Orders, commendation, something else entirely. The commander's gaze softened fractionally. "Corporal Hayes, if anyone dares mock your record again, remember this moment. You are not defined by petty assignments or small minds." Then he straightened, squared his shoulders, and took a slow step back, his eyes scanning the gate and the surrounding lot as if weighing the world itself. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. Even the heat seemed to pause for a fraction of a second. Alina stood there, stunned. She could barely breathe, barely comprehend what had just occurred. Her hand still held the envelope like it contained the weight of her career. The commander turned toward his SUV, each step deliberate, echoing in the silence that had overtaken the base. He paused once, looking back over his shoulder, just enough for Alina to feel as if the world had shifted around her. "You're not done yet," he said, almost under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear. Then he walked to the vehicle, opened the door, and disappeared inside. Alina's chest heaved. The corporals were gaping, frozen in disbelief. The sun bore down, harsh and relentless, but it no longer mattered. The world had shifted. Something had just begun. And deep in her gut, Alina knew that this encounter at the gate, this seemingly ordinary day of punishment, was about to change everything. Because the black SUV had not been the only thing waiting for her. Someone had been watching her, and now so was fate itself. The moment the SEAL commander stepped away from the SUV, a hush seemed to descend over the base gate. The hum of idling engines and the distant chatter of Marines at the Chow Hall faded into an almost surreal silence. Even the August sun seemed to dim slightly, as if acknowledging the shift in the air. Alina Hayes remained rooted in place, posture rigid, heart hammering in a rhythm she hadn't felt since firefights in Helmand. Her hands were clenched around the ID scanner, knuckles white beneath her gloves, but otherwise she stood poised, trained, disciplined, and acutely aware of every second stretching between her and the man walking straight toward her. The corporals behind her were less composed. Jenkins had dropped the soda he had been sipping and now stood frozen, eyes wide, brain apparently short-circuiting in real time. Brett fidgeted nervously, shoving his hands into his pockets, muttering something incoherent about commanders and Marines. Alina didn't flinch, didn't respond to the whispers. Her focus was locked entirely on the commander, a man who, by all appearances, was there for her and only her. He stopped about 15 feet away, the gravel crunching under his boots like measured beats of a drum, signaling some invisible order. His eyes scanned the base as if cataloging every detail, the crooked flagpole, the scuffed asphalt, the misplaced traffic cones, and then finally they locked onto hers. It was a look that made the world shrink. All at once, every distraction faded, the heat, the noise, the mocking corporals. Only the commander and Alina existed. "You," he said simply, voice low and calm, but carrying an unmistakable authority that pressed against her chest. "Yes, sir," she replied automatically, mind racing but voice steady. He nodded once approvingly but did not smile. There was no warmth in his expression, only recognition, respect, and a faint shadow of something deeper, something almost like familiarity. "Corporal Hayes," he continued, taking a slow, deliberate step closer, "I've been following your record for some time." Alina's pulse jumped, following her record on this base, doing gate duty, That didn't make sense. The commander's eyes were sharp, unblinking, cutting straight through the layers of self-control and discipline she had built around herself. He wasn't here to lecture, and he wasn't here to reprimand. He was here because he had known and seen exactly what she was capable of. Her thoughts flickered involuntarily to Helmond. The dust-choked streets, the explosions, the screaming. The screams she hadn't been able to forget, the ones that clung to her even after she had been safely out of combat. "You dragged a ranger through open fire," the commander said slowly, "while bullets tore past your position. 19 minutes. You kept him alive until medevac arrived. I've reviewed the after-action report, and I've spoken to witnesses." The air seemed to thicken around her. The corporals behind her muttered among themselves, disbelief etched into every line of their faces. She did what?" Brett whispered, his jaw slack. "Must have been clerical work," Jenkins muttered, though his voice carried a tone of uncertainty that betrayed him. The commander didn't flinch or acknowledge them. His gaze stayed locked on Alina. "I'm not here to debate what you did or did not do," he said. "I'm here because some jobs demand recognition, some actions require it, and some require more than just a note in a file." Alina swallowed hard. The heat of the day and the adrenaline surging in her veins made it difficult to focus, but she didn't let it show. I just did my job, sir," she whispered almost reflexively. He stepped closer again, and the faintest crease appeared on his weathered face. Not a frown, not a smile, but something that hinted at understanding. "Some jobs rewrite futures," he said softly. "Some earn respect. And some," he added, voice dropping lower, almost conspiratorial, "aren't repaid by standing on a gate in 100-degree heat while others mock you." The words hit her like a sudden gust of wind in the desert. Her chest tightened. It wasn't just a compliment. It wasn't just recognition. It was validation. The two corporals were now frozen in place, mouths open, eyes wide. They had never expected this. They had assumed this lowly gate post was her permanent punishment. They had been wrong. The commander's voice softened slightly, addressing her directly. "I've been watching Marines for decades. I've seen leaders rise from the lowest posts to the highest levels, and I've seen heroes overlooked because of politics, jealousy, or plain ignorance. You are not one of them." Alina felt her stomach twist. She had spent months enduring this gate duty, the petty jokes, the endless mockery. She had almost started to believe it was her due, that maybe she was too small, too inconsequential to matter. And now, in this moment, a Navy SEAL commander, someone who had witnessed real combat, real heroism, was telling her she mattered. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached instinctively for the next ID card, gripping it tighter than necessary. The commander paused, as if sensing her thoughts. He glanced at the two corporals behind her, then back at her, his gaze slicing through the awkward tension. "Let me be clear," he said. "Any mockery, any doubts, any small-minded assumptions about your abilities, they end today. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir," Alina said, voice firmer now. "Good," he replied, a faint nod acknowledging her response. He reached into his uniform jacket and pulled out a plain, sealed envelope. It was thick, marked with official insignias and heavy with importance. "This is for you," he said. "Open it after you leave this post. Consider it an introduction to what's next." Alina's pulse jumped. She took the envelope carefully, her fingers brushing the commander's hand. It felt like holding a lifeline, a key, a promise all at once. The commander's eyes softened fractionally, a shadow of warmth passing through the otherwise stern expression. "Corporal Hayes," he said quietly, "remember this moment. You are more than this post, more than these petty tasks. You've earned your place whether they see it or not." Then he straightened, squared his shoulders, and stepped back. His boots clicked on the gravel with deliberate rhythm, the sound echoing like a heartbeat in the suddenly tense air. Alina's mind was spinning. She barely breathed. She had expected humiliation, a lecture, perhaps a reprimand. But this, recognition from someone who mattered, someone whose judgment could not be questioned. The commander turned to the SUV, opening the door to disappear inside. But before he could settle, he paused. "Corporal," he said over his shoulder, voice low but firm, carrying across the asphalt. "I'm not finished with you yet." Alina's stomach dropped. Her pulse surged, half fear, half anticipation. The words lingered in the air long after he had gone. The corporals were still frozen in their seats, slack-jawed, unsure whether to breathe or run. Alina stood alone, the envelope heavy in her hands, heat beating down, the world returning inch by inch, but nothing feeling quite the same. Something had shifted. Something had begun. And deep down, she knew, this encounter at the gate was not the end of her day. Not even close. Alina stood at the gate, the envelope burning her hands, her pulse thrumming like a second heartbeat. The heat of the August sun felt muted now, replaced by the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Her mind replayed the moment just past, the commander's eyes, the weight of his recognition, the words that had cut through the noise and the petty humiliation of her gate duty. She hadn't allowed herself to hope. Not really. Not since Helmand. Not since the firefights, the chaos, and the endless nights that had left her awake with memories she tried desperately to suppress. But something in that brief encounter had shifted the ground beneath her feet. Behind her, Jenkins and Brett were frozen, stiff as statues, as though the world itself had decided to leave them behind. They whispered to each other, disbelief painting their faces, but Alina ignored them. Their whispers were meaningless. The commander, however, hadn't left. Not entirely. Even as he opened the SUV door and placed a hand on the roof, his attention remained on her. There was a tension in the air, like the calm before a storm, and Alina could feel the weight of it pressing down on her shoulders. "You did more than survive in Helmand," he said, his voice carrying low but clear across the asphalt. "You acted. You saved lives. You went beyond what anyone else would have done or even dared to do." Alina's throat tightened. She had never sought recognition. The medal citations, the quiet nods from her superiors in briefings, the fleeting thanks from comrades, none of it had ever mattered as much as simply doing her duty. But this was different. This acknowledgement carried weight, not just authority but understanding. I just did my job, sir," she said, her voice steady despite the surge of emotion threatening to betray her. He stepped closer, so close now she could see the faint lines etched into his face by years of combat and command, the sharp gray at his temples that spoke of wisdom and loss, the subtle intensity in his eyes that could make even the strongest officer feel small. "Doing your job," he said, voice deliberate, "sometimes changes the course of things far bigger than you realize. What you did, it mattered, more than anyone ever told you." The two corporals behind her squirmed uneasily. They had assumed gate duty was punishment, a way to remind her she was just a corporal in a world that didn't yet appreciate her. They had laughed at her assignments, mocked her in passing, and assumed this day would be just another humiliating chore. Now all their confidence had evaporated. They were silent, small, as if they'd been shrunk by the authority radiating from this one man. "Do they know?" Alina whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. "The guys I helped, the ones who made it through because of me." The commander's expression softened, a faint shadow of something almost personal flickering across his face. "Some of them know, some of them never will, but what matters is that you did. You acted when it counted, when hesitation could have cost lives, and that's why I'm here." Alina's stomach twisted. She had endured petty assignments, sneers, and gate duty meant to humiliate her. And yet here stood someone who not only understood what she had done, but valued it in a way no one else had. "Why are you here for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, laden with the mix of fear, curiosity, and disbelief she could not hide. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked past her, scanning the line of vehicles, the base's perimeter, the scattered hum of everyday life. And then, slowly, his gaze returned to her. "Because some people deserve recognition," he said finally. "Because some heroes aren't noticed until someone with the right authority observes them. And because I need someone like you for what's coming next." Alina blinked, confusion knitting her brow. "Coming next?" He nodded, still maintaining that quiet intensity. "Yes, opportunities arise, assignments that require skill, courage, and the ability to remain calm under chaos. I've seen what you're capable of. You don't belong stuck here at a gate while others underestimate you. You belong on the field where your abilities can make a difference that counts." Her mind raced. Fieldwork, assignments beyond base gate duty. She had thought her days of real missions were behind her. She had trained for combat, survived it, and somehow thought she could survive life's slow march back to bureaucracy and petty post assignments. Yet here was someone telling her that chapter wasn't over. "Sir, I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered. It was the truth. She wasn't sure if she could walk back into the chaos she had survived once, not with the memories, the losses, the shadows of Helmand still clinging to her. "You don't get ready," he said firmly, stepping closer so that the heat of his presence matched the sun. "You do, you act, and that's exactly what you did before, isn't it?" Alina swallowed hard, her throat tight. Memories of the desert flooded her, screams of comrades, sand and dust burning in her lungs, bullets tracing lines of death past her every day. Yet there was also clarity, courage, and the hard-earned knowledge that hesitation could kill. "Yes, sir," she said, stronger this time, her voice carrying authority even she hadn't expected from herself. The commander nodded. His gaze swept over her, evaluating, calculating, yet there was something almost approving in the set of his jaw. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a plain, sealed envelope, handing it to her with deliberate care. "This is for you," he said quietly. "Open it when you are alone. Consider it the first step toward what's next. A new mission, a new opportunity, and a recognition of what you've already accomplished." Alina's fingers shook slightly as she took the envelope. It felt heavier than it should have, the weight of authority and expectation pressing down on her. "Corporal Hayes," he said, lowering his voice even further, "what you did in Helmand, it didn't just save a life. It preserved a future. Never forget that. And never let anyone make you feel small or insignificant again." Her chest ached, a mix of relief, pride, and something else she couldn't name. The heat, the fatigue, the humiliation of the gate post, even the mocking corporals, it all seemed distant now. And then, just as suddenly as he had arrived, the commander turned toward his SUV, motioning for her to step aside. But before he could reach the vehicle, he paused. One hand on the roof, he looked back at her, his eyes locking onto hers. "I'll be seeing you again," he said. "Soon, be ready." Alina watched him climb into the SUV and drive away, the engine's rumble echoing across the gate. Her hand still clutched the envelope. Her mind was racing, heart hammering. Everything had changed in mere minutes. And as the vehicle disappeared from view, leaving her standing alone on the blistering asphalt, Alina realized that her ordinary day of gate duty had just become the most extraordinary day of her life. Something big was coming. Something dangerous. And she was now at the center of it. The heat of the afternoon sun had returned in full force, pressing down on Alina Hayes like a physical weight. Her uniform clung to her back with sweat, and the asphalt shimmered beneath her boots. For a moment, she felt the pull of exhaustion, the long hours, the endless gate duty, the relentless mockery of her peers, pressing down as heavily as the heat. But then she saw movement at the edge of the asphalt. The black SUV had stopped just past the gate. The SEAL commander stepped out again, not hurriedly, not casually. Each motion carried the weight of someone who was not used to wasting time or presence. He walked toward her, commanding the space around him without effort. Alina instinctively straightened. Her heart leapt. Everything in her training screamed discipline, control, yet her pulse raced, a wildfire of anticipation and adrenaline. The two corporals behind her, Jenkins and Brett, froze entirely. Their smugness had vanished, replaced by something close to terror. They had assumed her assignment was punishment. They had laughed. They had mocked. And now, in the presence of this commander, the world had flipped. The commander stopped in front of Alina. The space between them crackled with tension, a charged silence that seemed to slow time. The men in the shack whispered, though their words were meaningless. The air itself felt different, charged, alive. He raised his hand. Alina blinked. It was not a casual gesture. It was a full, flawless regulation salute, from a Navy SEAL commander to a Marine corporal on gate duty. Everything froze. The heat, the vehicles, the mundane rhythm of the base. It was as if the world paused to witness the moment. Jenkins and Brett practically choked on air. They had never seen anything like it. Their mouths opened, closed, and then remained agape. Alina's own heart thudded in disbelief. Her chest felt tight, yet electrified. She had survived firefights, earned recognition in ways that few outside her unit could understand, yet nothing had ever felt like this. A single salute from this man, one she respected more than anyone on base, seemed to validate everything she had endured. "Sir," she started, her voice almost breaking, you don't need to." "I do," he interrupted, his tone quiet, controlled, absolute. "And I will." Alina's knees went weak. Her pulse raced, a chaotic drumbeat in her ears. The two corporals had now slumped against the wall of the shack, pale and trembling. The heat, the sun, the open asphalt, none of it mattered anymore. Only the salute and the meaning behind it. The commander held the salute for a long, deliberate moment. The seconds stretched. They felt like minutes. It was not performative. It was real. It carried authority, recognition, and respect in its simplest and most profound form. Finally, he lowered his hand. The gravel crunched beneath his boots as he took a step back. Then he turned his gaze toward the two corporals, who were still gaping as if caught in a nightmare. His voice was sharp now, cold, carrying the unmistakable weight of command. "If this Marine is on gate duty again when I return," he said, "someone's career will end. Understood?" Jenkins stammered, "Why, yes, sir." Brett swallowed hard, "Yes, sir." The commander's eyes swept over them with a look that could strip paint off walls. "And next time you mock a combat-decorated Marine, at least read her record." The men shrank under his gaze. Their confidence had evaporated completely. Alina, meanwhile, was still absorbing what had just occurred. She held the envelope he had handed her earlier, its weight suddenly more than just paper and ink. It was a promise, a challenge, and a recognition all at once. The commander turned back toward her, his eyes locking with hers once again. There was an intensity there that made her pulse spike. "Corporal Hayes," he said quietly, almost under his breath, "I'm not finished with you yet." Alina's stomach dropped. She felt the familiar thrill of anticipation, that dangerous edge of uncertainty that had accompanied her in combat, and realized she hadn't felt this alive in months. "Sir, she began, but he raised a hand. "Not now, focus on your post, but know this, you're ready for more, and when the time comes you will act. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," she said, her voice firmer now, steadier, carrying more confidence than she thought she could muster. The commander gave a subtle nod and moved toward his SUV. The men inside the vehicle waited. He paused again, as if sensing she was still digesting everything. Then he spoke, softer this time, almost like a promise. "Remember this feeling, keep it close. You earned it, don't let anyone make you forget." He climbed into the vehicle, and the engine rumbled to life, its low vibration carrying across the base. Alina's eyes followed the SUV as it slowly drove away, turning the corner and disappearing from view. She stood alone on the asphalt, the heat washing over her once again, but the tension that had built inside her had shifted into a steady current of determination. Everything she had endured, the petty assignments, the mocking peers, the endless gate duty, felt like preparation for this moment. The envelope in her hands called to her. She resisted the urge to open it immediately, instead taking a breath and steadying herself. Her mind raced with questions. What assignment could require this level of attention? Why her? What had the commander seen that made him personally seek her out? And then, a sudden commotion at the gate snapped her attention forward. A pickup truck moving too fast, driver unaware of the protocols, barreled toward the gate. Jenkins and Brett started shouting, waving their arms in panic. "Corporal, stop him. He's not slowing down." The sun seemed to intensify, glaring off the asphalt as Alina's training kicked in. She didn't hesitate. She sprinted forward, boots pounding against the ground, adrenaline igniting every fiber of her being. The two corporals were scrambling, panicked and ineffective. Alina was the only one positioned to stop the vehicle safely. "Stop the vehicle, now!" she shouted, her voice commanding authority she didn't even realize she possessed in this moment. The pickup driver slammed on the brakes, tires squealed, gravel flew. The truck came to a skidding halt just a foot from her boots. The driver leapt out, hands in the air, shouting in broken English, "No problem, no problem." Alina exhaled slowly, heart still hammering, sweat stinging her eyes. She glanced at the two corporals, wide-eyed, pale, shaking. But before she could relax, her gaze shifted to the truck bed. Something metallic glinted under the tarp, catching the sunlight at an odd angle. Her stomach twisted. Jenkins whispered behind her, "What's that?" Alina didn't answer. Her instincts screamed this wasn't just a delivery truck. This was something else, something dangerous, something that had no business on the base. The weight of the envelope in her hands suddenly felt heavier. The commander's words, the salute, the recognition, it all came rushing back. She wasn't just a corporal on gate duty. She was the one responsible for what happened next. And whatever was hidden in that truck, she realized with cold certainty, was only the beginning. The summer sun scorched the asphalt like fire, but Alina Hayes barely noticed. Her eyes were locked on the pickup truck, heart hammering in a rhythm that matched the distant echoes of her Helmand firefights. The metallic glint under the tarp was wrong, and in her gut, she knew instinctively that wrong here meant danger. She crouched slightly, keeping her stance balanced and ready. The ID scanner, still in her hands, suddenly felt useless. Paper and plastic couldn't stop what might be inside that truck. Only her training, her instincts, and her courage could. "Corporal Hayes," Jenkins stammered from the shack, voice shaky. What is it? What are you doing?" Ignoring him, Alina approached the vehicle cautiously, boots scraping gravel with muted precision. Every step was deliberate, every sound measured. She had no time for hesitation. In Helmand, hesitation had killed people. The driver of the pickup flinched as she approached, hands raised high. No problem, you stop good," he said, voice shaky. Alina's eyes narrowed. It wasn't the man, it was what he carried. The tarp covering the bed of the truck shifted slightly in the breeze. A faint metallic clink, a glimmer that caught the sun and reflected it back like a warning. She took another step forward and her training screamed at her. She froze, crouched, eyes scanning. Improvised explosives, weapons, or surveillance equipment, all plausible. Then she heard it, a faint hiss. Her breath caught. The driver's eyes widened. I don't." Before he could finish, Alina moved with a fluidity born of years of combat. She grabbed the edge of the tarp, flipping it back with a practiced tug. Inside were not mundane supplies, not tools, not maintenance equipment. Metallic barrels gleamed, wiring snaked across the bed, fuses, timers, and circuitry. Explosives. Alina's stomach dropped. She had seen enough in Afghanistan to recognize the subtle details, The setup was crude, yet effective. Whoever had left this had intended maximum damage with minimal effort. Jenkins let out a low whistle behind her. Holy God! Brett stumbled out of the shack, hands on his head, muttering something incoherent. We didn't, she didn't, I mean. Alina didn't acknowledge them. Her focus was absolute. Every second counted. One wrong move and the entire base, maybe hundreds of lives, could be in danger. She moved around the truck, analyzing, scanning, assessing the safest approach. The wiring led toward a small digital timer. It was ticking, a low, persistent beat that sounded louder in her ears than the hum of the bass. Her pulse surged. Memories of past missions, past firefights flashed through her mind. The times she had disarmed devices, the lives she had saved, the fear that had driven her to precision. This wasn't a training exercise. This wasn't gate duty. This was real. Lives were on the line. She dropped to one knee, careful to maintain a safe distance, and examined the device. Crude, yes, but dangerous, very dangerous. Jenkins, she said sharply, move that driver away from the truck, now. He froze for a split second, then scrambled forward, grabbing the driver and ushering him to a safe distance. Brett followed, tripping over his own feet, wide-eyed, pale as a ghost. Alone now with the device, Alina's mind raced. Improvised explosives were her worst nightmare and her specialty. Years of training, countless hours of simulations, and real combat experience all converged in this instant. Sweat dripped down her temples, stinging her eyes, but she ignored it. One wrong move could be fatal. She traced the wiring with her fingers, careful, deliberate, knotting the timers, the fuses, the placement. And then, as she analyzed the setup, a subtle pattern emerged. The wiring was incomplete. A crucial connection was missing. The device wouldn't detonate unless someone completed the circuit. Her pulse steadied. The worst-case scenario had been mitigated, for now. Whoever had planted this wanted someone else to finish the job. Her fingers worked quickly, cautiously, dismantling the rudimentary trigger system. Each wire she disconnected, each clip she removed, carried the weight of life and death. One slip, one mistake, and the base could be engulfed in fire. Minutes stretched. Sweat plastered her uniform to her skin. Her heart raced. Every step, every movement required precision and calm she didn't know she still possessed. Finally she stood, having disarmed the device without incident. The timer had stopped. The wiring lay inert, harmless now. Alina exhaled, hands trembling slightly, adrenaline coursing like molten lava through her veins. She looked up, scanning the base. The corporals were still frozen, unable to comprehend what had just happened. The driver of the pickup, pale and shaking, muttered incoherently about being late and confused. Alina didn't answer. Her gaze went to the envelope in her hand. She finally opened it, unfolding the thick, official paper inside. It was a set of orders, not just any orders. Special operations orders, signed and sealed with the authority of the SEAL commander herself. They outlined a mission, immediate deployment, high stakes, and a team of operatives she had never met. The briefing included objectives, contacts, and details of an imminent threat to national security. Her hands shook as she read. The commander had chosen her, not as a corporal stuck at a gate, not as a soldier whose potential had been ignored, but as someone capable of saving lives, averting disaster, and acting decisively under pressure. The reality crashed down on her. Her life was changing. Her role, her purpose, and everything she had endured to this point had led to this moment. And outside, beyond the base, the threat wasn't gone. Someone had planted the device, had intended harm, had almost succeeded. Whoever it was, they were still out there, watching, waiting. Alina closed the envelope, taking a deep breath. She had a mission now, a purpose. And for the first time in months, she felt alive, every nerve alert, every instinct sharp. The gate, the heat, the petty mockery of peers, all of it faded behind the immediacy of what lay ahead. The SEAL commander had seen her, believed in her, and now she had a chance to prove herself in the way she had always known she could. Her boots scraped the asphalt as she moved back toward the shack. Jenkins and Brett had recovered slightly, but she didn't have time for them. The device was disarmed, the threat neutralized for now. Her mind was already running through the next steps, the next challenges, the assignments that awaited her. The envelope in her hands was more than paper. It was a key, a gateway to what she was meant to do. And deep inside, Alina Hayes felt the undeniable certainty. Her life would never be the same again. She tucked the envelope securely into her uniform and straightened her posture. The heat of the day pressed down, the base hummed with routine life, but she stood apart from it all, ready, alert, and prepared for the storm that was coming. The SEAL commander had not only recognized her, he had activated her. And Alina Hayes was ready. The sun was dipping lower now, casting long shadows across the base like silent sentinels. Alina Hayes stood by the disarmed pickup truck, the envelope secure in her pocket, every nerve alert, every muscle coiled with readiness. The heat of the day was fading, but the tension in the air remained, thick and suffocating. Her thoughts raced. Whoever had planted the device hadn't left by mistake. Someone had intended to harm the base, or worse, to test her. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. And then movement caught her eye. The black SUV appeared over the horizon, dust curling in its wake. Alina's pulse quickened. She recognized the engine's low rumble before the vehicle even reached the gate. He was back. The SEAL commander stepped out, expression unreadable, posture commanding. His eyes swept the perimeter before settling on Alina. She felt the familiar pull of recognition and respect, tempered with the awareness that whatever came next would not be easy. "Corporal Hayes," he said as he approached, voice calm but carrying a weight that pressed down on her chest. "Good work." Alina exhaled, momentarily letting herself breathe. "Thank you, sir," she said, voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her. The commander didn't smile. There was no room for celebration yet. His gaze swept to the pickup truck, then back to her. "You acted decisively. Quick thinking saved this base. That's why I brought you here, because the next step requires precision, courage, and trust." Alina's stomach tightened. She had expected recognition. She had expected a briefing. But trust carried weight she hadn't anticipated. "What's the next step, sir?" she asked. He reached into the SUV and pulled out a small, encrypted tablet. "We've identified the source of the device. It's part of a larger operation targeting military installations. You're going to assist a specialized task force in neutralizing the threat." Her pulse surged. High stakes, live action. This was exactly what she had trained for, yet every fiber of her being screamed caution. "I understand, sir," she said, tightening her grip on the envelope inside her uniform. The commander nodded once approvingly. "You'll deploy with a small team. You'll be responsible for entry and reconnaissance. Your decisions could determine success or failure. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" Alina hesitated just for a fraction of a second, memories of Helmand flashing through her mind, the chaos, the fire, the lives that hung in the balance. And then she nodded. "Yes, sir, I'm ready." He studied her for a long moment, then gestured toward the SUV. "Good, let's move. We don't have the luxury of delay." As they approached the vehicle, Alina noticed the corporals lingering near the gate, their expressions a mix of awe and fear. She ignored them, focusing entirely on the mission ahead. Inside the SUV, the commander tapped a few commands into the tablet, bringing up satellite images, blueprints, and intel on the operation. Alina leaned in, absorbing every detail, every potential risk. The target was a small warehouse on the outskirts of the city, seemingly abandoned, but intelligence indicated it was being used as a staging ground for additional devices. Every second counted. Any misstep could be catastrophic. As the SUV moved through the base gates, Alina's mind raced. She reviewed the equipment they'd brought, the entry points, the possible contingencies. This wasn't just about disarming explosives anymore. It was about strategy, leadership, and survival. The commander's eyes flicked to her briefly. "Stay sharp. This operation will test everything you've learned and more." Alina nodded. "Understood, sir." They arrived at the perimeter of the warehouse. The air was tense, charged, as if even the wind held its breath. Alina and the commander stepped out, flanked by two other operatives whose professionalism radiated experience and danger. The warehouse loomed ahead, dark and silent, its exterior nondescript but its interior a hive of potential threats. Alina's training kicked in instantly, situational awareness, threat assessment, and rapid problem-solving all firing at once. The commander signaled for a halt. They crouched behind a low wall, scanning the area. Alina's pulse pounded in her ears. Every instinct screamed vigilance. "Intel indicates two armed guards inside," the commander whispered. "They're likely monitoring communications. We need to neutralize them quietly." Alina's fingers tightened on her sidearm. She moved with the team, silent and precise, every motion choreographed through years of training. They approached the entrance. Alina peeked around the corner, eyes scanning the dimly lit interior. Shadows moved, crates shifted, and the faint hum of machinery filled the air. She signaled the commander, two targets near the back, unaware of the team's presence. He nodded. "Engage." In a synchronized motion, Alina and the operatives moved, silencing the guards efficiently and swiftly. No alarms, no chaos, perfect execution. Inside the warehouse, the hum of machinery grew louder. Wiring snaked across the floor, crates stacked high with suspicious packages. The sense of danger was palpable. Alina approached the central table, where documents, schematics, and electronic devices were scattered. She scanned the intel quickly, noting potential triggers and threats. The commander's voice came low in her earpiece. "Good work so far, but the main device is in the back room, highly unstable. I need you on that." Her pulse accelerated. She moved toward the back, every step deliberate, aware that a single misstep could trigger disaster. The room ahead was dimly lit, filled with the faint smell of chemicals and metal. In the center, on a reinforced table, was the device, larger, more complex than the pickup truck setup earlier. Wires snaked across it like a spider's web, blinking lights indicating countdowns and active triggers. Alina froze for a moment, assessing. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the awareness of what was at stake. Lives, entire base, every miscalculation could mean death. She took a deep breath. Training, experience, instinct, all of it converged. She moved closer, methodically tracing wires, analyzing circuitry, identifying triggers. Minutes stretched like hours. Sweat ran down her temples, her fingers precise, calm despite the chaos. She disconnected a critical line, then another, carefully neutralizing the device piece by piece. Finally, the device went dark. The blinking lights ceased. Silence. Alina exhaled, muscles relaxing slightly. The immediate threat was neutralized. The commander entered the room behind her, his expression approving but serious. "Excellent work, Hayes. You handled that perfectly. Calm, precise, decisive." Alina allowed herself a small nod, adrenaline still surging. "Thank you, sir." But as she looked around, she realized this was only part of the mission. There were still threats, still unknown variables, still danger lurking beyond the walls of this warehouse. And she knew deep in her gut that the commander's words from the gate, the salute, the recognition, had all been a prelude, a preparation for the trials still ahead. Alina Hayes had proven herself once in Helmand. She had disarmed a potential disaster at the base. But now, in this warehouse, standing beside the SEAL commander and a specialized team, she realized the stakes were higher than ever. and the next move could cost them everything. The sun was sinking low, casting an amber glow over the base. Shadows stretched long and sharp across the asphalt, exaggerating every detail. The corrugated walls of the warehouse, the scattered crates, the heat rising off the pavement in shimmering waves. Alina Hayes stood at the gate, the envelope from the commander tucked securely in her uniform. Every nerve in her body thrummed with alertness, every muscle ready. The day had escalated in ways she could never have imagined. From a mundane gate duty assignment, she had neutralized a potentially catastrophic threat, disarmed a live device, and assisted in the takedown of a criminal operation targeting military installations. Every step had demanded courage, precision, and instinct. And now, standing at the threshold of the base, she realized she had truly arrived at a turning point in her life. The gate was quiet. The corporals, Jenkins and Brett, had been sent on menial tasks, shadows of themselves compared to the confident, composed Marine who now held their attention. Word of her heroics had already begun to ripple through the base. Whispers followed her as she walked, awe, disbelief, respect. Alina's heart still raced, not from fear, but from the raw adrenaline of survival and accomplishment. The SEAL commander's words echoed in her mind. You are more than this post, more than these petty tasks. You've earned your place. And then she saw him. The commander emerged from his SUV, stride measured, gaze locked on her. Time seemed to stretch as he approached. Around them, the base buzzed with muted activity, but in that moment, nothing else mattered. The heat, the asphalt, the distant hum of engines, all faded into insignificance. Corporal Hayes, he said, voice low, carrying both authority and a rare warmth, step forward. She did. Every step felt monumental, as though she was walking toward a moment she had unknowingly trained her entire life for. He stopped a few feet away and raised his hand. Alina froze for a heartbeat, remembering the first time he had saluted her at the gate. The memory was vivid, the crisp, precise motion, the recognition, the validation. That single gesture had changed everything for her. And now it was about to happen again, but this time with the weight of everything she had accomplished hanging in the balance. The commander's salute was flawless, formal, yet carrying an unmistakable intensity. Not just respect, but acknowledgement of skill, bravery, and perseverance. It was a gesture that transcended rank, duty, or expectation, a recognition of a Marine who had proven herself in every conceivable way. Alina's breath caught in her throat. She returned the salute, rigid and precise, every muscle taut with pride, adrenaline, and an emotion she couldn't quite name. The corporals watched from a distance, slack-jawed, pale, and utterly speechless. They had spent weeks mocking her, dismissing her, underestimating her. And now, the base had witnessed the moment that ended their assumptions forever. The commander lowered his hand, stepping closer. You handled the day with precision, courage, and calm. You disarmed the device, neutralized threats, and protected this base and everyone in it. That's why you're here. That's why you've earned this. Alina's chest swelled. All the petty humiliations, the gate duty, the sneers, the doubts, every moment that had made her question herself felt meaningless now. Every ounce of effort, every sacrifice had led to this instant of undeniable recognition. Sir, she said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion, I thank you for believing in me. He gave a small nod, acknowledging her words without distraction. Belief alone isn't enough. Action is what matters, and you've acted decisively where it counted most. For a moment the base fell into a suspended silence. Soldiers paused to watch. Marines whispered to each other. The salutes, the words, the recognition, it was cinematic, almost surreal. And in that pause, Alina felt the weight of everything she had endured, everything she had accomplished, and everything that awaited her in the future. Then the commander gestured toward the gate. Your assignment here isn't over, but it has changed. You are no longer confined to the post. Your talents, your courage, and your judgment will serve a greater purpose. Alina's heart leapt. She had imagined this moment countless times, A Marine being recognized, validated, and trusted. But the reality exceeded even her wildest expectations. The wind shifted, carrying the sounds of the base. Distant laughter, the hum of vehicles, the metallic clang of routine maintenance. And yet, standing there, she felt like she was in a world of her own. The past weeks, the months of gate duty, the petty mockery, all of it had led to this defining instant. The commander's eyes met hers again. Remember this feeling, Corporal Hayes. Remember the clarity, the focus, the courage you felt today. It will carry you through the challenges ahead, and there will be many. Elena nodded, "Yes, sir." He stepped back slightly, giving her space, then added quietly, almost a whisper, "You've earned your place here. Never let anyone make you forget that." And then, in a gesture that seemed to echo the first salute at the gate, but carried the culmination of everything she had proven, he saluted her once more. Elena returned it. The gesture was no longer symbolic. It was the culmination of struggle, courage, and undeniable merit. Every muscle, every heartbeat, every ounce of her being aligned with the recognition. Around them, the base seemed to awaken from a stupor. Soldiers glanced toward the gate, murmuring in disbelief. The corporals, Jenkins and Brett, stood frozen, unable to reconcile the reality with their previous assumptions. For Elena, though, it wasn't about them. It wasn't about petty rivalries or assignments or humiliation. It was about something far larger, validation through action, recognition earned through courage, and the undeniable realization that she belonged, not just as a Marine, but as a leader capable of decisive impact. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a final amber glow across the base. The heat of the day gave way to the cool, still tension of evening, but Elena felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the weather. She felt alive, seen, and ready. The commander lowered his salute, offering a nod that carried authority, approval, and a promise of future challenges. A promise Elena was ready to accept. She returned it one last time, a crisp, perfect gesture that echoed across the gate and into the very core of her being. In that moment, the gate, the base, and the petty hierarchies of rank melted away. Elena Hayes stood recognized, respected, empowered. And she knew with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning. As the SEAL commander walked back to his SUV and disappeared into the fatting light, Elena took a deep breath. The envelope, the recognition, the mission, all of it had transformed her. She was no longer the corporal assigned to gate duty. She was Elena Hayes, Marine, hero, survivor, ready for whatever came next. And somewhere in the base's quiet hum, a story had been written, one of courage, recognition, and the moment a single salute changed everything.